Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so Śrī Tattva-sutra. We will start Sutra 1 today. Eka paro nanyaha. Nanyaha. The supreme reality is one without a second. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary. So it says summary of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary. What it is I made sure from this compiler of the study guide, it just means that it's directly quoted from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary. It's not necessarily his entire commentary. So where it says summary, it might be misleading, because summary usually is, someone reads it and then they say it in their own words. But this is actually from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary. So it's like an excerpt, not really a summary. So when I get to those, I'll just say Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Otherwise, it becomes a little misleading. So from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary, the Supreme Lord alone is the supreme reality. No other object can be realized as the ultimate reality. Pretty self-explanatory. Then Sutra 2. Aguno pi sarva shaktir ameyatvat. The Supreme Lord is all-powerful due to his inscrutability, although he transcends the phenomenal qualities. Does anyone know what that means? That sentence. The Supreme Lord is all-powerful due to his inscrutability, although he transcends the phenomenal qualities.
I don't know this word, inscrutability.
Inscrutability. So scrutinize is when you can understand something through observation or interpretation. So inscrutability means that it's impossible to understand it or to interpret it. So since he is impossible to understand, through material senses, he is all-powerful and he transcends the phenomenal qualities. So phenomenal means perceived by the senses, right? So he transcends the phenomenal qualities because he is impossible to understand through the senses, and therefore he is the most powerful. That's what this sutra means. So then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary. The supreme reality, capital, so it's referring to the Krishna, is beyond the scope of the phenomenal, which means perceivable, and non-phenomenal, which is the imperceptible, qualities possessed by the sentient. You know what sentient means? This is like we get to do an English class too, along with the sutra. So sentient means those who are able to perceive, and non-sentient, so those who, non-sentient objects. How is it possible then for the reality to have any relationship with such objects, referring to the phenomenal qualities? So how could there possibly be any relationship between one who is imperceptible and one who relies on their senses, basically? After all, it is generally observed in this world that a relationship between two objects requires certain similarities of their natures, right? So one's saying that if Krishna and the living entities are completely different, there's nothing in common with them whatsoever, then how could there be any sort of relationship, right? So that's a doubt. This is a strange place to have a footnote, but we're going to do it, but then we're going to revisit it because it's a doubt that's expressed, and then we want to resolve the doubt. But before we resolve the doubt, we're going to read about an example of this phenomenon. So footnote 1. And this is from Stotra Maharaj's Substance and Shadow book. So this would be an argument of the deists. Deism, and Pandava spoke about that either earlier today or maybe yesterday. Deism is a term first used by the Calvinists in the 17th century. Deism is the belief in God as the first cause of the universe, who created the laws by which the universe is governed, but who is in no way immanent in his creation. God's maintenance of the world means nothing more than the performance of natural laws. Nature follows a regular course. The sole purpose of the world is to be the habitat of mankind. The deists opposed mystical and supernatural interpretations of scriptures. Human reason is the true measure of scriptural understanding. Many of the founding fathers of the United States of America, for example, Adams, Jefferson, and Paine, were of deistic inclination. So just to summarize this, the deists believe that God made the material world, and along with that, he made some natural laws that the material world runs by. But then after that, he stepped back. He has nothing to do with it, right? So that's what a deist thinks. He steps back and doesn't interfere with anything. And then continuing the footnote. On the other hand, according to the HarperCollins Dictionary of Philosophy, page 120, the philosophy of theism, in most interpretations, is God is partly immanent in the universe and partly transcendent. In essence, this definition is the Vedic philosophy of the Supreme Person, right? So theism understands that God is partly immanent and partly transcendent. There has to be these two aspects. As stated in Purusha Shukta, with 3/4 of himself, the Purusha ascended, the other 1/4 was born here. From here on all sides, he moved toward the living and the non-living. Again and again in the Vedic literatures, we find references to Tripada Vibhuti and Ekapad Vibhuti, the 3/4 of the Lord's splendor displayed as the spiritual world, and the 1/4 by which he pervades the material world. About the material manifestation, Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 10:41, Yad yad vibhuti mat sattvam srimad urjitam eva va tat eva avagachatvam mamate jom sambhavan. Know that all these opulent, beautiful, and glorious creations are born from part of my total splendor. Because they oppose theism, the theories of deism, monism, pantheism, and dualism are actually atheism. Deism separates God completely from his material creation. Monism renders God partless. Pantheism confines him to the material universe. And dualism divides creation against him, placing part of it in the hands of a rival. So that's why these different philosophies are actually considered atheism, because they oppose the standard definition that was given before. Even major religious traditions like Christianity are influenced by deism and dualism. The English natural theologian Robert Boyle, who lived from 1627 to 1691, expressed open contempt for, and then this is a typo, that should say deism, not theism, because he actually is a theist. He expressed open contempt for deism as a doctrine of infidels. When he drew up his last will and testament, he bequeathed 50 pounds per annum forever, or at least for a considerable number of years, in order to institute a series of lectures for proving the Christian religion against notorious infidels. In other words, atheists, again, this should say theists, not theists, pagans, Jews, and Mohammedans. So he was paying people who would give lectures or publish papers that would defeat these so-called theists, that fall under these categories of deists, pantheists, monists, and dualists, right? So even after he died, he let it. He wrote it in his will that these people would be paid if they were able to prove these philosophies wrong. Monotheism and pantheism are synonyms for theism. Monotheism believes in one God. In the Vedic religion, there is only one God, though he empowers servants who act as demigods on his command. These demigods are worshipped as God only by foolish people. Pantheism, which means you're seeing God in everything, God is present in everything, so that you can worship him in a mountain or a stream, teaches that all things are imbued with God's presence because all things are in God. God is more than all there is. He is all conscious and the supreme unifying factor. That ends that footnote from Substance and Shadow. So again, to express the doubt that was written here so that we can understand how to resolve it. The supreme reality, the Supreme Lord Krishna, is beyond the scope of perceivable and imperceptible qualities that are possessed by those who are able to perceive things and those who are not able to perceive things, the sentient and non-sentient. How is it possible then for the reality, capital R, for Krishna to have any relationship with those who cannot possibly perceive him? After all, it is generally observed in this world that a relationship between two objects requires certain similarities of their natures. So the doubt is that if there's nothing in common, how can there be any sort of relationship? So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur continues, this doubt cannot be resolved by mental speculation. The Supreme Lord is endowed with infinite qualities, although he is beyond all qualities, right? So he has infinite qualities, but then at the same time you can say he's beyond the qualities, or as the Mayavadis would say, he's without qualities, because he doesn't have material qualities, so he's beyond qualities. This statement contradicts mundane logic, right? So in logic, if you are something, you can't also not be that thing, right? Therefore, it contradicts mundane logic. Therefore, the supreme reality is called inscrutable. What's inscrutable mean? It was in the sutra. It's okay. It's hard to remember all these things. So scrutinize something, it means to study something, to be able to perceive it and interpret it or understand it. So inscrutable means that there's no way that you can understand it with your senses or yeah, you can't analyze it properly, right? It can't be understood or interpreted. So then he continues, there cannot be evidence from observation of the material world to prove the existence of God and give an insight about his nature. The classical examples by which we can infer the existence of an invisible object by the signs of a visible object do not apply in the case of the Supreme Lord, since no signs of the supreme reality are observed in this material world. So all this is to say that the Lord can't be understood by mental speculation. In other words, we're going to get to it, but bhakti is the only way to understand the Supreme Lord. So continuing, no external proofs are required to establish the existence of the thinker as it is a self-realized fact. I'm going to read that again because I messed it up. No external proofs are required to establish the existence of a thinker as it is a self-realized fact. Who knows the famous quote that says the same thing? It's in Latin, it's cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. That was Rene Descartes. Yeah. So if you're able to understand that you're thinking, like I'm thinking about something, I'm pondering something, therefore I know that I exist, because otherwise how could I possibly be thinking, right? So I think, therefore I am. This is what this sentence is saying. No external proof is required. You don't have to have any other outside evidence. Just the fact that you're thinking is proof that you exist. So no external proof are required to establish the existence of a thinker, as it is a self-evident realized, or a self-realized fact. Similarly, the realization of the Supreme Lord through devotion is self-evident and does not need any support from sense perception and inference. Therefore, the conclusion is that the Supreme Lord is endowed with infinite potency in spite that he is beyond the scope of qualities. This is possible due to his inscrutability. So, in the same way that there's no outside source that can prove that we exist other than that we are contemplating, that we are thinking. So there's no other external logic that we need to prove that. In the same way, there's nothing outside of bhakti that needs to be used in order to prove God's existence. It's the only thing that can prove God's existence. Now here it says it does not need any support from sense perception and inference, and that is absolutely true. It doesn't. However, when we explain the existence of God to people, or philosophical principles, our process, as Pandavaji mentioned this morning through Panchanga Nyaya, is we start with the revealed scriptures, which are infallible, and then in order to relate to whoever we're talking to, or even to ourselves, try to figure it out for ourselves, we can use examples that use both sense perception and inference. So we can show how logically you have experience of something that will help you to understand this which is presented in the Vedas. We were just repeating what you were giving us this morning. So, but it doesn't need that. It doesn't require that. Just the Vedas, which is Apaurusheya, that's completely enough, right? So understanding Krishna doesn't rely on sense perception or inference, but we use these things as a secondary way to convince others and even convince ourselves to continue on, right? But it's really the bhakti that's revealing his inscrutable nature. Yes.
Does it mean that then pratyaksha doesn't apply for spiritual reality, only for material reality?
No, it means it can support the spiritual reality. It doesn't. Spiritual knowledge doesn't depend on these things, but these things can help us understand spiritual reality. Does that make sense? It's not the sense perception or the logic that is actually giving us the realization. It's the bhakti that's behind those. But since we're using those things to at least take us from where we're familiar with to what we need to get, then it's used as a vehicle, but it in itself is not actually awakening bhakti. It's just being used as an instrument to help us receive bhakti. Is that?
I mean, in Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, there is Pratyaksha Agavam Dharmyam, I think it's the shloka.
Mm-hmm.
And it means it can be directly perceived. So is the same thing, or is it different?
It could be. Did you want to add something to this, or you had something else? Go ahead.
So when we talk it as a epistemological aspect, then first comes Shabda Brahman. And then once it becomes Shabda Brahman, then Anuman and Pratyaksha that go in line with Shabda can be used as Brahman to understand the subject. And of course, what he is telling about Pratyaksha or Anuman is, once you go at a certain level, then you can directly perceive the
Yeah, so means just as we were talking about there, that I think therefore I am, and no other outside logic is needed or required. Same thing with bhakti, no other thing is needed. But when we experience it, then it is proven. So then we are able to, through logic and through sense perception, understand it, experience it. Yes.
This is very interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and there are a few instances that I found in Shastra where not just pratyaksha, but even the reasoning process, the mind of the pure devotee is the pramana itself. For example, well, first of all, what Chandra mentioned, when the person is very advanced and then the spiritual senses are awakened, then he can perceive the Lord. So then pratyaksha is called divya pratyaksha. It's not the ordinary laukika pratyaksha. It's a different type of pratyaksha. So it is obviously proof, just like the way, for example, Śrī Prabhupada perceives Krishna. This type of Krishna, this Krishna that Śrī Prabhupada knows, this is our Krishna that we it's not any other Krishna, because there are many Krishnas. But this one is our goal, our prayojana. So this is based on his pratyaksha, on Prabhupada's pratyaksha, because he is there with him. So there are two other cases I would like to mention, like an example. In Mahabharata, when Pandavas won over Draupadi, then it was suggested that they should marry her all of the fight. And then there was a dilemma in the mindset of many people, because this seemed to be very extraordinary proposition. Usually doesn't happen in this way. Usually a man has many wives, the wife one has a husband. So then when they were talking back and forth and discussing this, then Yudhishthira Maharaj said something very interesting. He said, my mind is naturally established in dharma. So when I think about this proposal, my mind doesn't revolt against it. Hence, it must be okay, it must be established. But this is dharma Raj. But you see, this is an example of in a sense, it's connected to divya protection, because my mind says so, because I am not appalled by this proposition, therefore must be okay. If I say like this, then it's obviously false, because I'm not established in dharma, I'm not fixed like he. Or, even more interesting, when Mother Yashoda saw the whole universe inside Krishna's mouth, then she became bewildered, and then she started doubting herself. Am I okay? Maybe something is wrong with me. Why I'm seeing all this? Or maybe some evil entities putting me into illusion. And then she went through this, and then at the end she calmed herself down. Oh, Krishna, of course, Krishna. She didn't want Mother Yashoda to be in such a state. So Mother Yashoda thought, well, I feel, not even think, I feel that Krishna is my son. Because she was thinking, who is Krishna actually? Who is this Krishna? Maybe he's a great demigod, maybe. I don't know. Then she thought, because I feel that he's my son, that means he's my son. And this is the reality, just because I feel like this. But it's another example of how the feeling or the thinking or the perception, the perception of the great devotee is a pramana, because this is the reality. Krishna is my Rishabha's son. He is not actually the Supreme Personality. Or we can say he is the Supreme Personality, but more important for him is that he is the loving child of Mother Yashoda.
Thank you. Yes, so divya pratyaksha. So also it's worth saying that, when we were talking about the human frailties, imperfect senses, etc., the material senses are imperfect, but we also have, spiritual senses, the way we perceive things. So once we advance in spirituality, we're able to perceive things not with our material senses. So in a way, it's different. It's like the protection. Another thing that I'll point out, just because kind of reminded me of this, Krishna's devotees are so dear to him that even if one of his dear devotees, I'm not talking about someone like me, I'm talking about like an acharya. If someone who's very dear to Krishna, we're all dear to Krishna, you know, because we're all part of him, but if someone who's very dear to Krishna, even if they technically make some sort of mistake, right? So let's say they're explaining something and they just miss a technical point. I'll give a perfect example of it because it happens in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when it's giving the dimensions of, I think it's just Jambudvip. In one verse it says something like 10 million, and then the next verse it says something like 100,000. So it's a different number. It's a completely different number, but it's talking about the same thing. And Srila Prabhupada was just remaining loyal to his spiritual master, because that's what he wrote. So he wrote the exact same way. He didn't try to mentally think, uh-oh, these are two different things. I got to figure out which one it is and then clear up the air. No, he remained faithful to his spiritual master and he presented it the exact same way. So the beauty of this is that if someone actually had a proper measuring device and wanted to challenge this, like they would say, one of these has to be wrong, just like in this doubt that we just covered here in the sutra. These two ideas can't simultaneously exist because it's either whatever it was, 100,000 or a million. But I don't remember what the numbers were, but they were, you know, off by a 0 or 2. It can't be both, right? But the beauty is, if someone actually had a measuring device to prove the acharya, who's very dear to Krishna, wrong, they would measure it and they would say, see, look, it's 10,000, so the other one was wrong. And they say, well, this is science, you can't just measure it once. And then they would do it again and they'd say, oh, it's 10. Oh, so then the first one was wrong. Okay, yeah, no, go ahead, measure again. Okay. Oh, but that's impossible. But it would happen like that. Just like when you know, anytime someone has influence, someone tries to stump them. They want to blow up their whole thing. So Srila Prabhupada was once asked very famously, is Krishna so powerful that he can create a mountain which is so big that he can't even lift it? And so it's a trick question, because if he can't create it, then he's limited because he can't create it. And if he can create it, then he can't lift it. So either way, it proves that he can't do something. Either he can't create it or he can't lift it, right? But Srila Prabhupada, without even thinking, said, yes, of course. And then he would lift it, right? And this is how it goes. You can't put material limitations on the Supreme Lord, right? So when we understand Krishna, who's unlimited, right? And we understand his deep love for his devotees, then we can see how these things absolutely can exist simultaneously, right? And then we start to actually perceive them with transcendental senses. And so actually we're going to get into that soon, probably today, about things that seem to be contradictory in the Shastra, but how we're actually able to eventually see how they coexist. Did that answer that question? Okay.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please.
Just remember this past time of Jambarisha and the sage Durvasa, when Durvasa Muni went all the way to the Kuta, he wanted to find the truth, because in his mind there was a contradiction, and this was not resolved. So finally he asked Krishna, okay, please tell me what has more importance for you, what is more important according to Shastra, what is the reality? Following Ekadashi, because in his mind this was what Ambarish Maharaj was doing. Durvasa Muni told that Ambarish Maharaj decided to follow
Oh, it's a
fellowship at the expense
very good.
of respecting the Brahman guest. This was the contribution he made. So he asked the Lord directly, all right, you, Supreme Lord, tell me, what's more important, following Kalashi or respecting the Brahmanas? So some Brahmana, then the Lord, because we're talking about what is the reality, and Divya Prataksha, that means perceiving the reality as it is. So because Church Shampoo mentioned that the devotees are so important to Krishna. So they're so important to the extent that Krishna least he lets them define the reality.
Yeah.
So in this particular pastime, the reply of Lord Narayana Krishna was, my dear Guru Vasa, I don't know what is more important. Don't be ashamed. Go and ask the king. He knows. Please don't feel comfortable because you're the great Brahmana. You have to submit to some Kshatriya and ask about the reality, about the truth. Because I also don't know the answer to this question. Whatever he says, whatever Marisha says, this is the reality. And then finally, you must start to understand what actually is going on. It is not a question of right and wrong, it's a relationship matter. So in this sense, what I want to say, Krishna's devotees, they define what is right and what is wrong. Krishna lets them do it. Just like we were talking about this yesterday. When the preachers, they try to spread the mercy of the Lord, then Krishna doesn't interfere with the decision of the preacher, where he decides to give the mercy. Krishna leaves this choice to the devotee. In this sense also he defines the reality. And he doesn't interfere.
No, thank you. No apology there. And just like Krishna is willing to break his own promises if it benefits his devotee, he doesn't care. And that's why he also said that Arjuna should declare it boldly. Because if he says it, he's known to change his mind. But his devotees, they're never wrong. Right? Because Krishna will make it so. Because so his devotees' promise is more important than his own. So these are things that logic cannot, material logic can't come anywhere near understanding. And even if one understands the intricacies of love, they still won't quite get it. It needs to be bhakti, pure love, and then you'll start getting it.
And it's the experience because it's just understanding.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
I mean,
Which is just. Which is why Jnanina's tattva-darshana. It doesn't say that the spiritual master knows the truth and that's why you approach him. It's that he has seen the truth. Like it's not just that he knows it. He sees it. He sees it. So if we're talking about that kind of pratyaksha, seeing, then that's divya.
Krishna says one should inquire to this. This means tattva-darshi. Brahma actually saw him. This is the
nice.
What was this verse?
Which one?
The Anvaya Vyatya. One should inquire directly or indirectly. No, one should search after the absolute truth and point direct or indirect methods up to this. That means up to the moment where Brahma saw Krishna. Krishna revealed himself.
Yeah, we could do this all day. Thank you. That's good. So then, in this light, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport to Mantra 5 of Śrī Īśopaniṣad. In this connection, two words the revealed scriptures often apply to the Lord, saguna, meaning with qualities, and nirguna, meaning without qualities, are very important. The word saguna does not imply that when the Lord appears with perceivable qualities, he must take on a material form and be subject to the laws of material nature. For him, there is no difference between the material and spiritual energies because he is the source of all energies. As the controller of all energies, he cannot at any time be under their influence as we are. The material energy works according to his direction. Therefore, he can use that energy for his purposes without ever being influenced by any of the qualities of that energy. In this sense, he is nirguna, without qualities. Nor does the Lord become a formless entity at any time, for ultimately he is the eternal form, the primeval Lord. His impersonal aspect or Brahman effulgence is but the glow of his personal rays, just as the sun's rays are the glow of the sun god. So here Srila Prabhupada very nicely is explaining how he's simultaneously full of qualities, full of all qualities, because he's the reservoir of all qualities, and every quality comes from him. Yet he is without qualities, without material qualities, because since he actually is the source of them, he's not influenced by them. We're influenced by them because we're currently seeing them as separate from Krishna. We've misused our free will. We think that we're independent from him. Not only is everything else separate from him, so are we in our illusion state. And so we're perceiving these material qualities. But since he's completely spiritual, he doesn't perceive them the way that we do, right? But he can make anything happen however he wants. Continuing with Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary, someone may raise a doubt that if such controversial conclusions are repeatedly accepted, it will give way to irrational beliefs, right? So if you say that you can't really perceive of it, it's, you know, it's a contradiction in material logic, but we accept it anyway. So the doubt may come that, well, if you keep doing that, believing something that can't be logically explained, then your belief is actually irrational. It's not what's another word for rational? Reasonable, sure. Yeah, it's not a reasonable situation. What? Yeah, reasonable or logical. So in reply to this, the author, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, says that the assimilation of mutually contradicting qualities is not uncommon for the Supreme Lord. The contradicting qualities are impossible for phenomenal objects, but the Lord is non-phenomenal. Otherwise, how is he the Supreme Lord? Right? So just as the various examples we were giving about Krishna creating the mountain so heavy that he couldn't lift it, and then he would lift it, he's beyond all of these so-called limitations that we come up with, logic and things like that, of course all these things are possible for him. So it's not irrational to believe these things if they're coming from authority. It would be irrational, for example, if I just made something up and said, okay, this is what I believe. There's actually a religion, it's currently recognized as a religion, that was thought up by a science fiction writer. He literally just made a bunch of stuff up, wrote a science fiction book about it, and people started reading it and they said, actually, this could make some sense. And then they made an actual religion out of it, and a lot of people are part of this religion. I won't say what it is, but those who know. But it's actually a recognized religion somehow. They make a whole lot of money. It's very profitable, very profitable religion. But it's based on a science fiction book that some fellow wrote. So that, of course, is irrational. But if we're actually getting the knowledge from the Vedas, authorized knowledge, and we're believing it on faith, even though it doesn't make logical sense, it's still rational. It's the only thing that is rational. Everything else is quite irrational. Okay, then Sutra 3. You look like you want to say something. No? Okay. Sutra 3. Viruddha samanyam tasmin na chitram. The perfect assimilation. Assimilation means the complete understanding or integration of innumerable mutually controversial qualities is not uncommon for him. So it's not uncommon for Krishna to for you to be able to completely understand things that normally wouldn't make sense if you're actually engaging in bhakti in Krishna, because within Krishna, all things that are seemingly contradictory are can be seen properly. So we'll read Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary to further shed light on that sutra. In the Supreme Lord, there are innumerable mutually contradictory qualities. Whatever we say about him becomes indicative of controversy. When we say that he is the creator, it suggests the mutation of the immutable, right? So if he's creating something, right, he who is unchangeable is actually changing because he's making something that wasn't there before. So that's the definition of something that's changed, but he's not changeable. So when we say he's the creator, we're saying that the unchangeable changes things. When we say that he is the protector, we accept that he is a doer, because how do you protect something if you're not actively doing something? Although he is aloof, right? So if he's aloof, why would he feel the need to protect us? When we say that he is the destroyer, it suggests inauspiciousness, because destruction is inauspicious in the all-auspicious Lord. By saying that he exists, the Lord who is beyond time is confined to the limits of time. There are innumerable similar mutually contradictory qualities that can be ascribed to the Supreme Lord. These apparent contradictions cannot be resolved by mental speculation. Attempts to solve such problems by mundane logic are fruitless and lead to atheism, right? You could try to figure these things out with your material mind, but you won't be able to. We don't have the what's the term? The computational, the processing speed. We don't capacity. I don't know. There's a computer term about it.
Computation.
Yeah, but I think it's had something to do with the processing speed or something in the computer that computation. We'll call it that. We don't have the ability to actually to come to these. So then what happens is people become atheists. And then example here is Charvaka, etc. The only solution is to take shelter in devotional service, which preliminary stage and root is called faith. By this self-evident faith of the soul, one will realize the truth about the perfect assimilation, which again means integration or full understanding of all the mutually controversial qualities in the Supreme Lord. That's the only way to understand it, right? By definition, since he's beyond everything, he's transcendental, there will be all of these mutually contradictory qualities that he possesses. And the only way to understand them, not through mental speculation, but through bhakti. So then in Śrī Īśopaniṣad mantras 4 and 5, to further prove this point, it is stated, although fixed in his abode, the personality of Godhead is swifter than the mind and can overcome all others running. So if he's fixed in the supreme abode, that means that he's there, he's staying still. So then how is he faster than the mind, right? How can he overcome all others running if he's just fixed in one spot? The powerful demigods cannot approach him. Although in one place, he controls those who supply the air and rain. He surpasses all in excellence. The Supreme Lord walks and does not walk. He is far away, but he is very near as well. He is within everything, yet he is outside of everything. Right? So these things seem to contradict themselves. Srila Prabhupada explains the inconceivable nature of the Lord and his potencies in his purport to Mantra 5. Here is a description of some of the Lord's transcendental activities executed by his inconceivable potencies. The contradictions given here prove the inconceivable potencies of the Lord. He walks and does not walk. Ordinarily, if someone can walk, it is illogical to say that he cannot walk. But in reference to God, such a contradiction simply serves to indicate his inconceivable power. With our limited fund of knowledge, that's the best way to say it instead of doing the computational thing. We have a limited fund of knowledge. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. With our limited fund of knowledge, we cannot accommodate such contradictions, and therefore we conceive of the Lord in terms of our limited powers of understanding. For example, the impersonalist philosophers of the Mayavad school accept only the Lord's impersonal activities and reject his personal feature. But the members of the Bhagavat school, adopting the perfect conception of the Lord, accept his inconceivable potencies and thus understand that he is both personal and impersonal. The Bhagavats know that without inconceivable potencies, there can be no meaning to the words Supreme Lord, right? So if we could just perceive him, how could he be the Supreme Lord if we can just understand it? Like, yeah, no, I get it. We don't even understand things that are mundane fully. So if we can completely understand the Supreme Lord, how would he even be supreme? Continuing Srila Prabhupada's purport, the fact is that there is nothing but God within and without. Everything is a manifestation of his different energies, and in this way, there is a oneness among his diverse energies. Although there is oneness, however, the Lord in his personal form still enjoys unlimitedly all the pleasures enjoyed minutely by the tiny part and parcel living entities. End quote. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I just want to quote something from Bhagavatam.
Yeah, please.
It's Srimad Bhagavatam 6, famous verse 6, 9:36. Also, Krishna trying to block that all contradictions can be reconciled in you. Maybe we should quote this also in the studio. Is it quoted?
No, but I was thinking of it, and I tried to quote it, but I didn't remember it exactly like you're about to read it, so please.
Oh Lord, since you are the Supreme Person, the reservoir of unlimited spiritual qualities, the Supreme Controller, your unlimited glories are inconceivable to the conditioned souls. Many modern theologians argue about right and wrong without knowing what is actually right. Their arguments are always false, and their judgments inconclusive, because they have no authorized evidence with which to gain knowledge of you. In other words, they have no proper access to the Veda. They have other Brahmana, which is imperfect, just like Śrī Īśopaniṣad explains about. Well, there is a conversation between Chandkaji and Lord Chaitanya, and Chandkaji very honestly explains the limitations of his own Brahmana. He belongs to this particular Brahmana. And also Prabhupada makes in the commentary, makes the case about the other famous Brahmanas in the world, different from the Vedas. So they're not perfect, although they are qualified, but they're not perfect. So naturally, if you base your knowledge on them, you'll have problems. So they continue. Their arguments are only because their minds are agitated by scriptures containing false conclusions. They are unable to understand the truth concerning you. Furthermore, because of polluted eagerness to arrive at the right conclusion, their theories are incapable of revealing you, who are transcendental to their material conceptions. This is also interesting. So first of all, the Brahmana is not absolute. The Brahmana theory is not absolute. So second, their own attitude and motivation is not completely pure. Yeah. Polluted eagerness to arrive at the right conclusion. What does it mean? It means I want to gain something because I arrived to the proper conclusion. So I will be established as the great scholar. There is this famous philosopher, Schopenhauer, and Nietzsche, or one of these two. I'm not sure. Nietzsche. So he said Nietzsche. He says in one place. Now let's imagine. Oh, no, he says, what if the absolute truth is a woman? So this is how he begins. What if the absolute truth is a woman? Then, if this is the case, then don't we have enough evidence to conclude that since all these sages over the 8 years that try to reach the absolute truth, since they are notoriously known as people who don't really know how to deal with women, because they are very awkwardly pushy and they're just super attached to describe to reach the absolute truth because of their qualitativeness to arrive at the right conclusion. Isn't it reasonable to conclude that they have not reached the absolute truth because the absolute truth, being a woman, she did not reveal herself. So this is how he begins this book. This is the first sentence of one of his books. So, and we can say, in reply to Master Friedrich Nietzsche, we can say, yeah, you up to something because absolute truth is Radha Krishna. We know that Srimati Radharani, ultimately, she is the spiritual potency, and Mahatma Astamam Prata Dhani Prakriti Mashkara. Because of her grace only, we can understand something about Krishna. If she is not pleased because of this awkward pushiness and polluted eagerness, she will not reveal herself. So not only the pramana, but the person who is using the pramana is also following him. And you are transcendental to their material conceptions. Krishna is beyond all this computation, materialism. You are one without a second, and therefore, in you, contradictions like doing and not doing, happiness and distress are not contradictory. Your potency is so great that it can do and undo anything as you like. With the help of that potency, what is impossible for you? Since there is no duality in your constitutional position, you can do everything by the influence of your energy, therefore Krishna is not satisfied. Okay, and the last thing. Here it is stated that all these sages, so-called theologians, they cannot understand absolute truth, but there are other verses in the Bible where Krishna explains that there are other types of sages who also have contradicting opinions about things. But Krishna says, because they work under the protection of my energy, therefore they can say anything without contradicting the truth. So this is the balance of this verse. Okay. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Was that the first part again?
The last one.
No, the first part where all contradictions are resolved. It was the first verse you read.
Well, I read only one verse. 6, 9,
Oh.
6.
Repeat it, please.
6, 9, 36. 6, 9, 36.
Right, but now
it's very long.
that was just the verse that you read? You were reading, you weren't reading the first part? So the first part of that verse.
All Supreme Personality of Godhead, all contradictions can be reconciled in you.
Right, all contradictions can be reconciled in you, right. Joy. That was one verse?
One verse.
It wasn't like several verses in one group? All right, Krishna. Was it Lord Brahma speaking?
Yeah, I was.
I knew it.
No, I think it
No.
should be,
Sixth canto.
no, it should be Rudrasa, no? 9, 6, 9. Maybe Rudrasa.
But the chapter is called Prescribed Duties for Mankind.
Because he has famously long verses, but he's not the only one.
Indra killed Vishwarupa. Oh, this chapter 9. So, chapter 6.
Anyway, I'll get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
So, Sutra 4. Sasachit anando yanagamyo bhakti vishayatva. The Supreme Lord, having a Satchidananda form, is not perceivable to the cognitional or the mental faculty of the jivas, but only realized by the spiritual function called bhakti. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur comments, that eternal, transcendental, and blissful form of the Supreme Reality can be realized only by devotional service. Since the jiva is finite, he can never fully understand the infinite absoluteness of the Supreme Reality. The devotees aspire only that along with the increase of devotional service to the Lord. The transcendental bliss of God realization also increases. Oh no, I read that wrong. Because that can be read many different ways according to where you pause. The devotees aspire only that along with the increase of devotional service to the Lord, the transcendental bliss of God realization also increases. The ultimate reality is endowed with infinite potency, which can transform herself, because we're talking about Shakti, in infinite forms. This divine potency is known as Lakshmi, Durga, etc. That potency of the Lord is blissful and sportive, playful, and therefore her nature must be known as bliss. The unification of the Lord and his potency is indivisible, means inseparable, and eternal. This is indicated by the word sat. Many people indulge in the controversy of attributing either definite form or formlessness to the ultimate reality. The Supreme Lord, however, is endowed with both the natures of form and formlessness. Those who believe in any one of these aspects and deny the other are incomplete in their knowledge. I'll read that sentence again because it's super important. Those who believe in any one of those, whether he's strictly just has a form or he's formless, and deny the other are incomplete in their knowledge. The Supreme Lord does not have a material form, but his eternal spiritual form is always perceived by his unalloyed devotees. Thus, the conclusion is that the Lord is formless from a mundane perspective, but endowed with divine form when seen with a spiritual vision. Hence, both forms of the Lord are accepted. So when it says the Lord is formless from a mundane perspective, it means that you can't perceive him with material senses. So if we're completely materially engrossed, it means we're always exercising our free will in the wrong direction, and we're not aspiring to actually practice spirituality, then there's no way we'll be able to perceive God. Because here's the thing. The reason this material world exists is because we jivas said, no, I want to exist separate from God, right? So God had to build this entire creation and also hide, because if he's seen, then we don't actually feel that we're independent. It's like if our parents, we want to do something alone, right? Because we're a big boy now. I want to do something on my own, right? Maybe ride my bike or something. So I make my dad take the training wheels off and I want to ride it alone. But if he's still holding on to the back of the bike so it doesn't tip over, I'm not actually doing it on my own. But if he's hiding while doing that, then I feel, oh yeah, I'm doing a good job, I'm doing it by myself, right? So his whole purpose is to hide because we wanted him to, right? So he can't be perceived by material senses because that's the design of it. As soon as we actually want to perceive him, when we turn to him with sincerity, then we'll be able to actually perceive him, right? So it has to be, it can't be with the mundane, from the mundane perspective, but those endowed with the divine, when seen with spiritual vision, right? So both forms of the Lord are accepted. So it's not that we say, no, he's not formless. He is formless to those who can't perceive him, right? Because they're busy trying to, be God themselves, right? So it's there, it's accepted. It's not the ideal situation. It's good for us because we're also rebellious living entities. So if he weren't doing that, then we'd be, out of luck because we just wouldn't exist anymore, right? So it's good that he has this formless form for us to pay while he patiently waits for us to turn to him. So we accept both. And if we don't accept both, then we're incomplete in our knowledge. Continuing, Srila Bhakti-Vinod Thakur, a question may be asked. If bhakti is the natural faculty, which means an inherent ability in every soul, why so many people are unable to believe in God? Right? If that's our natural position, then why is it that so many people are unable to believe? The explanation is that if the object of that faculty is far away from the faculty, or if there are obstacles between them, then the natural faculty becomes unmanifested and remains dormant. There's an example just in case you didn't understand those words. For instance, a childless person does not understand the parental affection. An unmarried woman cannot realize conjugal love of a husband. Similarly, the self-evident divine love cannot manifest itself within the ignorant, worldly-minded fallen souls. Atheists engage in materialistic thoughts exclusively and thus become unable to relish the unalloyed divine love. Right? So although it's our inherent nature, since we've separated ourselves from him by our choice, we don't have a readily experience of that. And so therefore, until we pursue it, we're unable to develop, unable to relish unalloyed divine love. That's clear, that paragraph?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
The previous one. It's so fascinating how the Vedas are so accommodating with talking about this. That there are three aspects of the absolute truth. We accept all of them. And Bhagavatam, although Bhagavatam begins with discarding all Kaita Dharma, still Bhagavatam accommodates Brahman, Paramatma as ways to approach the absolute reality. It's not the ultimate, the highest, the most developed understanding of God, but it is there and it's accepted. It is, in a sense, a bona fide way to approach the world. So it's so accommodating, so liberal. So many other traditions, spiritual traditions, don't have this luxury. With them, you have to accept the dogma, the historic narration, the narrative that something has happened and he was born and then he went somewhere, that he died, that he resurrected. And if you don't accept this, then you are out in the cold forever. It's such a great difference, and the Vedas are so accommodating, and also the Vedas will tell you what is the ultimate conclusion and where you have to apply your endeavor, but at the same time they're accommodating all other people. We have, as we mentioned, we have the description of the universal form. If somebody is attracted to this form, there is accommodation for this type of persons. If you're attracted to Brahman, yes. Or the Paramatma, yes. Welcome, welcome. Come in. We don't judge you. We will tell you that this is not the highest understanding of God, but we will not neglect you or ignore you and tell you that you are rascal number one. No. Come in advance. That's so different perspective. That's what I want to say, because the previous paragraph is about.
Right. Thank you. And continuing with Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Here, an argument may be raised. If mental speculation has no access to the ultimate reality, then instead of discussing this tattva-sutra, means someone might argue with Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself, who's writing this tattva-sutra, then instead of discussing this tattva-sutra, it is better to engage in meditation, prayer, adoration, and worship of the deity. And his response, this doubt is unnecessary because the knowledge discussed in the tattva-sutra is not like the dry impersonal knowledge, but it is the very presentation of the unalloyed principles of bhakti. Right? So the doubt is, if you can't access the Lord by speculation, then what are you doing now? You're logically trying to say something which looks a lot like speculation. So he's saying yes, but this is different because this knowledge that's discussed in the Tattva-sutra, it's not like the dry impersonal knowledge, but it's the presentation of the unalloyed principles of bhakti. And so he's taking these from Śrī Īśopaniṣad, from the Vedas, and then he's explaining it in such a way that others can actually appreciate Krishna's nature. Bhakti is characterized by divine attachment to the Lord, and it is independent from karma and jnana. When such attachment is directed toward the Lord alone, it is real. But if attachments If attachment is applied toward a material object, the result is fearful binding to this world. Those two sentences are super important. If you have an attachment, if it's directed toward the Lord alone completely, it's real. But if attachment is applied toward a material object, the result is fearful binding to this world. Right?
Similar in Bhagavatam, there is verse from Bhagavatam says the same. Mahatsya Dvara Holding Teshtam Dvara Nashita Sandhisanga. The attachment to the great devotees is the way of liberation. Attachment to material things is the way of highway to hell.
Yes, yes. Therefore, the inquiry after the supreme reality is the root of spiritual advancement. Unless this supreme reality is clearly identified and realized, there can be no genuine attachment for it. Right? So in other words, we have to understand the relationship. The attachment for it would be our goal. And unless we actually understand, realize it and identify it through these descriptions in Shastra, then there can't be attachment to it.
It's very interesting because Bhakti-yoga in the beginning suffers in the same way. There are Rupa Goswami and Śrī Prabhupada that explain why do we have to study so scrutinizingly what is pure devotion service, what is Sutta Bhakti? And then they explain the same thing. Because attachment is something natural for the soul. And if we don't know where do we direct our attachment, then it will be misdirected, just like the misdirected compassion to Arjuna. So therefore, they take such a painstaking on this definition of Uttama Bhakti. It's well known that every word there is the exact word, and it's explained that it is not too much in this sentence. It's not too exclusive. It's not too why, because this is the basic of our process, the basis of our process. If we don't know what is pure devotion, guess what? We'll do something else, impure devotion. Therefore, the discussion, although it may look like jnana, actually is necessary because it defines the object. It's part of the Sambandha jnana. Yeah.
No, that's fine. No apologies needed. And then it was actually a good transition to this paragraph because Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is going to continue saying what you just said. Therefore, while vain arguments and hostile rationalism are definitely harmful to faith, the study of the ultimate reality is different from them. Those who do not have Sambandha Gyan will not be able to ascertain their own degradation, even when their attachment is applied to a material object apart from the Lord. Therefore, one should know that it is most essential for the devotees to carefully understand the reality and to apply their unalloyed love toward Him alone, along with the cessation of dry abnegation and unproductive argument. Abnegation is renunciation. So dry renunciation means like either Pago Vairagya, or there's all sorts of different Vairagyas. What's the other one? Smasana. And so that's the funeral one. And then what's the other one? The monkey one? Markata, yeah. There's different renunciations that aren't advised. And we went over that when we were talking about I lost the word. In Bhagavad Gita last year when we were talking about
The sixth chapter.
yeah, no, not Vairagya, another word. I lose words sometimes. Sometimes it's the easiest word too.
Is it
What?
Is it
Krishna.
Sanskrit?
Yeah, it's a Sanskrit word.
To Vairagya.
Hold on, I'll have it in a moment because it's in this verse that I know. No. No, it's not in that verse. Anyway, I can't believe it. I lost it. Yeah, but the idea is that it means sacrifice.
Tyaga.
Huh?
Tyaga.
Tyag. Thank you. Phew. Man, what was the one I didn't know earlier? Maybe that was Revelation or something. But anyway, so is that actually the word I'm thinking? Anyway, the point was in Bhagavad Gita was pointing out that unless it's actually meant for Krishna, then it could be the other two. But I think it was. Yeah, it might have been that. Yeah. So that's actual renunciation. Otherwise, just giving something up for because we want a better result, then it's, in other words, if it's materially motivated, we're giving something up like, oh no, it's just forgot the word again. No. It's what you call. It's what I call when people work, but people say when I go to the woods, I'm doing austerity. Austerity, yeah. So just giving something up is an austerity. So we give it when we work a job, we give up our freedom, we give up a lot of our time, we give up a lot of our energy because we get something in return so that we can pay for the things that our family. This is what dry abnegation is talking about. So that's what we want to focus on. We want to make sure that if we are renouncing something, that we're actually renouncing it because we understand that I can't, or if I'm not going to be able to properly use this in Krishna service, then it has no purpose, right? We accept things that are that we can engage in Krishna service, and we reject the things that cannot be. Not that cannot be, because everything can be engaged in Krishna service, according to our nature.
I like this about non-productive arguments. Giving up dry.
Yeah, and unproductive arguments. Yeah, because the thing started out where Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, well, you may argue that if this talk doesn't lead to anything, this logic, then what are you doing talking about it? And then so he's bringing this up. So he's showing that when you have dry abnegation or unproductive arguments, that they're not going to go anywhere. So they're not based on. There are productive arguments, exactly. So if they're based on the Vedas, then a product can come about it, so it's productive. But otherwise, it's just completely unproductive. And by the way, the arguments are only productive when both are citing the Vedas and both have faith in the Vedas. If one doesn't, they're not going to listen anyway. There's also no fruit.
So this is called, according to Nyaya, Vada, right? Productive argument.
Vada.
Yeah.
Right.
Otherwise, it just contributes to the world keeping.
Exactly. Continuing. If anybody does not care for the study of the reality, capital R, so the Supreme Lord, due to excessive attachment, he must be either a totally liberated soul or someone who is extremely bound to this world. This is a very important point. And it's worded in such a way where we might miss the point. If there's someone who doesn't care for the study of the absolute truth, means because of excessive attachment, right? It either means that he's completely liberated and that thing that he's excessively attached to is Krishna, so there's no need to study these things because they're fully realized, or someone who is extremely bound to the world. So in most cases, if we're not willing to listen to Shastra, the study of this reality, it means we're extremely bound to this world because we're not we're not totally liberated souls here, right? So, and then he continues, this is the secret of this tattva-sutra. The secret of this tattva-sutra is basically, if you don't care for the study of this,
You are.
it means that you're extremely bound to the material world.
Okay, so the fact that we are seems to be interesting.
It's at least some good news. It's not bad news. Then he continues, one should engage in the study of the kindest teachings of Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Then his heart will be filled with extreme admiration. Without the inquiry after the supreme reality, this is a heavy sentence. Without the inquiry after the supreme reality, innumerable births spent in hearing and chanting will not be able to fetch divine love at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna.
Yeah, Bahu Janma Karya Vishram Kirtana Kavutana
Paripramadana.
This is same as this.
Yeah.
Can you read one more time?
Yes, I'll read it 2 more times if you want, 3 more even. Without the inquiry after the supreme reality, innumerable births spent in hearing and chanting will not be able to fetch divine love at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna.
Please, one more time.
And one more time for that camera. Should I face you too, or this is okay with the profile? It's not my good side. Without the inquiry after the supreme reality, innumerable births spent in hearing and chanting will not be able to fetch divine love at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. So it's quite important that we inquire after the supreme. So last year, when we were doing our course in Gita, there was this debate or this discussion of basically what is the least amount of things we can do in order to go back to Godhead. And we gave a big long list of things that you have to do in order to go back to Godhead, because it's not a cheap thing. And some were saying, okay, well, but it's been said, I've heard it, that as long as you chant your 16 rounds and you follow the 4 regulative principles, you'll go back to Godhead, right? And then someone even told a story, I couldn't find it anywhere, so I couldn't verify it. Someone told a story that someone was asking Srila Prabhupada himself, and so he said like that, and they said, well, what if we can't do that? And then he said, you grab my cloth or something. I couldn't find that one. I don't know if he did that or not. But the point is, if we follow the 4 regulative principles and we chant our 16 rounds, then we're certainly going to get a favorable birth. It doesn't mean you're going to go back to Godhead immediately. In order to go back to Godhead and fetch the divine love at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, we actually have to be in love with Krishna, right? Nobody's in the spiritual world that doesn't want to be there. We're here in this material world because we don't want to be there. We wanted to be the center, So here we are. So until we take ourselves out of the center, and how do we do that? How do we take ourselves out of the center? Well, we have to know about him, right? How do we put him in the center if we don't even know anything about him, right? So inquiry after the supreme reality is essential. We have to understand who he is, who we really are, because we certainly don't have a clear idea of who we are. We think we're quite a bit better than we actually are, more important. So we have to understand who we truly are, who Krishna truly is, and what our relationship is, right? Sambandha. Then, once we understand that, we can apply that knowledge in Abhideya. So we act according to that knowledge, not just, I know it, now okay. Did I pass the test? I can quote to you all of the things that I learned. Now do I get the goal? No. You have to also apply those things. You live them. You don't just repeat them. You live them. And then you get the prayojana, right? Otherwise, innumerable births spent in hearing and chanting. If we're not actually understanding who Krishna is, then we continue like that, which isn't necessarily the worst thing, spending innumerable births hearing and chanting. It's just not the best thing. It's not the worst thing, but it's not the best thing, because a few things worse than that are spending innumerable births, for example, in the hellish planets, where one of the crazy things about the hellish planets is here our bodies, they're built in a certain way where we have a certain threshold of pain. Means if there's so much pain, we pass out. The body just makes you lose consciousness so you can't feel that much pain, right? This is a defense mechanism that's programmed into these bodies. In the hellish planets, that feature is removed from the body. So you don't pass out from the pain, you actually just continue to feel that much pain for a very, 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 very long time. So yeah, that would be worse. Innumerable births doing that, of course. But the point is, we don't want to keep spending births here in this material world. We want to go to the spiritual world. So how do we do that? We inquire after the supreme reality. We have to know who we truly are, who he is. And when we do that, when we know who we are and who he is, we immediately will fall in love with him. It's impossible not to. Then we have to act accordingly, and then we can actually fetch the divine love at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Then, Srila Prabhupada writes in his purport to Mantra 4, through mental speculation, even the great philosopher cannot know the Supreme Lord, who is the absolute personality of Godhead. He can be known only by his devotees through his mercy. In the Brahma Samhita 534, it is stated that even if a non-devotee philosopher travels through space at the speed of the wind or the mind for hundreds of millions of years, he will still find that the absolute truth is far, far away from him. Although the individual parts and parcels of the Lord's potencies have all the symptoms of the Lord himself, they have limited spheres of activity and are therefore all limited. Right? So we try to go beyond the limits of, where we can travel, for example, and think, okay, now I'll find the Supreme Lord. But the problem is, we're not limited by time and space from the Supreme Lord. We're limited by our misuse of free will. That's what's keeping us from seeing him. So instead of trying to, travel to different parts of the universe to find where he is, all we have to do is actually understand who we are, who he is, and then we can remove that covering and actually be able to see him. Srila Prabhupada continues, the parts and parcels are never equal to the whole. Therefore, they cannot appreciate the Lord's full potency. Under the influence of material nature, foolish and ignorant living beings, who are but parts and parcels of the Lord, try to conjecture, which means making an opinion, but it's based on incomplete information, so it's not even a good opinion. The parts and parcels of the Lord try to conjecture about the Lord's transcendental position. Śrī Īśopaniṣad warns of the futility, the uselessness, of trying to establish the identity of the Lord through mental speculation. One should try to learn of the transcendence from the Lord himself, the supreme source of the Vedas, for the Lord alone has full knowledge of transcendence. End quote. Then, in his book Amnaya Sūtra, Srila Bhakti-Vinod Thakur writes, quote, and this is going to address something that you said earlier about Srimad Bhagavatam. Although realization of the impersonal aspect of the Supreme is not the final goal, it is sometimes a useful intermediary stage. That the realization of the impersonal aspect of the Supreme is sometimes useful then one who always sees all living entities as spiritual sparks, in quality one with the Lord, becomes a true knower of things. What then can be illusion or anxiety for him? End quote. But the intermediate stage of impersonalism is not always recommended, as it is shown in the Śrī Īśopaniṣad Mantra 12. Quote, Those who are engaged in the worship of the demigods enter into the darkest region of ignorance, and still more so in the worshippers of the impersonal absolute, right? So we have to be careful. It can be a stepping stone for those who have a lower level of realization. But if one stays on that stepping stone, if one doesn't then take the next step, one, tries to build a house on the stepping stone and thinks that's a good idea, then it's actually worse than going to the darkest region of ignorance, right? Even more so. So we see that sometimes there are things that we accept for the time being that will help us in our devotional service. And we see that sometimes those things also have to be left behind. So we have to use our intelligence and understanding of the Shastra through the instructions of the Guru and by the examples of the sadhus, when it's time to accept something, when it's time to let something go.
Yes, in another place, bhakti-yoga explains exactly the same point. And he says that sometimes this is our duty, but this is because we're on this level. When we reach the next level, what has been our duty, it's not anymore our duty. We have to move forward. It's very important. Otherwise, we got stuck on the same level. And our duty, our dharma becomes adharma. Same thing is actually adharma for us.
Vishal, I just sent you a message. Prabhupada writes a message of Godhead about this very point.
This is from Message of Godhead?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's this quote. Factually, the mystic path is uniform and one. It is something like a series of stepping stones to the highest goal. By accepting this path of mysticism, one becomes a pilgrim towards spiritual perfection. Work with transcendental results is the first stepping stone on the transcendental path. When empiric philosophical deductions and a desire for renunciation are added, progress is made to the second stepping stone. When one adds a definite conception of the supreme ruling principle, the Supreme Lord, one progresses to the third stepping stone. And finally, when my head's turned this way, I hear the echo in that room. Sorry. And finally, where was that? And finally, when a process of transcendental loving service to the Supreme Personality is added, progress is made perfectly to the ultimate goal. The mystic path is therefore a transcendental evolution in which all the above stages are part of the gradual process of spiritual development. It is necessary to mention all of the above stages to understand the final stage. Therefore, one who desires to attain the supreme goal may adopt the systematic mystic path. But, he continues, one should not stop simply upon stepping on the first, second, or third stone, but must make his progress complete by going all the way to the final step. This is Message of Godhead?
Yeah.
I talk about this all the time, but
Chapter 2.
this is awesome. Okay, thank you for this. But he must make his progress complete by going all the way to the final step, the perfect stage of transcendental loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who reaches an intermediate stage but does not make any substantial progress beyond it, merely remaining satisfied with that particular stage of his development, may be called by that particular name as, for instance, Karma Yogi, Jnana Yogi, Hatha Yogi, and so on. For this reason alone are the mystics of different stages named differently. So the conclusion is that although the path of mystic yoga is one, the transcendental devotee is the greatest of all mystics because he alone follows the path to its ultimate goal. Oh, there's a read more.
So this is the same point Prabhupada makes in second chapter of Bhagavad Gita in the commentary. Yes. Even the same words.
At this point, it should be noted that progressive development along the transcendental mystic path is not totally identical with ordinary material progress. In the material world, one has to pass through a certain stage of development before one can be admitted to the next stage, and there is no alternative to this process of progress. It may be cited, for example, that if somebody wants to pass the MA examination, Master of Arts, he has to pass through the preliminary examinations, and there is no alternative to this. No one can expect to be admitted to the MA level without having passed the other preliminary examinations. Yet in the transcendental world, although there are approved regulations to bring one from the lower stages to the highest goal by a gradual process of development, one can, by the mercy of Godhead, pass the transcendental MA examination without even having passed the preliminary examinations. But this extraordinary mercy of Godhead is possible only by a confidential relationship with the personality of Godhead. And this confidential relationship with the personality of Godhead is possible only by the transcendental association of the devotees of the personality of Godhead. Yeah, that's a great section. Thank you.
The standard one which is before it also.
Okay.
And then it not really.
And then I'm just going to finish this thing right before the sutra, where Sutra 4 ends, because it's just a sentence. If someone misunderstands the eternally existent, transcendental, and blissful divinity as a transient entity bound by time and space, then the next sutra answers his doubt. So we'll again start with that, but I just wanted to show where that.
So again, we see that just like in our thematic study, Sri Bhagavad bhakti-yoga, and also other charities, they finish the one point by establishing the truth, and then begin the next doubt, and then the doubt is answered in the next sutra. So this is how we also try to build the Bhagavad Gita thematic study. Following this example is not arbitrary, neutral.
Establishing the Sangati.
The transitions. Okay, should I read this before we stop, or should I? Okay.
Yes.
That's a good one, but okay, so we're at time. Om Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Bhakti-Vinod Thakur ki jai, Srila Tattva-sutra ki jai.